This is Mr. Wesley, and today we are talking about the bill that arrives at the end of a marriage that should have ended years ago, and why most men over 55 never see it coming until it has already taken everything they spent 3 decades building. You know the marriage I am describing. Not a marriage in open crisis. Not a marriage with screaming or dramatic betrayal, or the kind of visible collapse that at least has the decency to announce itself clearly. The marriage I am describing looks fine from the outside. It functions. The bills get paid. The holidays happen. The grandchildren visit. You and your wife move through the same house on separate tracks, fulfilling the external requirements of a shared life with the practiced efficiency of two people who have been doing this long enough that it no longer requires any real emotional participation from either of you, and you stay. You stay because leaving at 55 or 60 feels like detonating something that took 30 years to build. You stay because the finances are tangled in ways that seem impossible to separate cleanly. You stay because starting over at this stage of life feels less like freedom and more like falling off something very high with no way to know what is at the bottom. And every year you stay inside a marriage that stopped being a marriage years ago, the bill gets larger. You just cannot see the bill yet, because nobody has handed it to you in a form you can read. In a few minutes, I am going to show you exactly what that bill looks like. Not in vague warnings, not in abstract cautionary language, in specific documented costs, financial, physiological, psychological, that researchers have now quantified with enough precision that you will not be able to look at your current situation the same way after today. But first you need to understand something about why men in this demographic stay inside dead marriages at a rate that should alarm every person who cares about men over 50. Because the reasons are not what most people assume they are. And understanding the real reasons is the only way to understand the real cost. I am Mr. Wesley. I have spent years working alongside men who are navigating the late chapters of marriages that stopped working long before anyone said so out loud. Men who are not weak. Men who are not passive. Men who built things, who provided, who honored their commitments with a consistency that the culture no longer celebrates, but that these men practiced anyway, because it was simply who they were. And those men are now sitting inside arrangements that are costing them things they have not yet calculated, because nobody ever showed them the ledger. This channel exists to show you the ledger. Let me open it. The first thing you need to understand is what sociologists who study long-term marriage call the sunk cost trap in intimate relationships. You know what a sunk cost is in business terms. It is money already spent that cannot be recovered regardless of what you decide next. The rational economic decision is to ignore the sunk cost entirely when making a forward-looking choice, because the money is gone whether you proceed or walk away, and therefore it should have zero influence on what you do next. Every business school in the world teaches this. And virtually every man over 50 in a dead marriage violates it completely when it comes to the most important financial and personal decision of his life. The 30 years you spent building this marriage are a sunk cost. The sacrifices you made, the compromises you accepted, the version of yourself you set aside in the service of the partnership, those are sunk costs. They are real. They are significant. They deserve to be honored and grieved. But they are not a reason to continue. They cannot be recovered by staying. And every year you stay inside a dead marriage because of the weight of what you have already invested, you are not protecting that investment. You are compounding the loss. That compounding is what I am calling the retirement tax. And it has 4 specific components that I want to walk you through one at a time because each one is more expensive than the men paying it realize. The first component is the longevity cost. This one is the most visceral and the most ignored. The research on this is not ambiguous. Men in high conflict or emotionally disconnected marriages, and a dead marriage is by definition an emotionally disconnected marriage even when it is conflict-free. Men in these marriages show measurably elevated cortisol levels sustained over years. Elevated cortisol sustained over years is not an abstract health risk. It is the documented physiological mechanism behind accelerated cardiovascular aging, suppressed immune function, disrupted sleep architecture, and increased inflammatory markers that correlate directly with the conditions that kill men in their 60s and 70s at rates significantly higher than their emotionally healthy counterparts. The research does not say that a bad marriage might shorten your life. It says it does. The longevity cost of staying in a dead marriage is not metaphorical, it is biological, it is measurable, and it is being paid by your body right now in ways that will not show up on a balance sheet, but will absolutely show up in a doctor's office in 10 years. Picture this. There is a man I know, I will call him Gerald, who retired at 62 after 40 years of work, having done everything right. He saved carefully, he invested consistently. He stayed in his marriage because leaving felt financially reckless, and because he told himself that retirement would change things, that more time together would rebuild what the busy decades had eroded. He told me that in the first year of retirement, he aged more visibly than he had in the previous decade. The stress of being in constant proximity to a marriage that had no warmth in it, with no work to escape to and no structure to hide inside, compressed something in him. He told me he started waking up at 4 in the morning with his heart racing, and nothing specific to point to as the cause. His doctor told him his blood pressure had increased significantly in 12 months. Gerald told me he already knew why. He just did not know how to say it out loud yet. Gerald's story is not unusual. It is the retirement tax arriving on schedule. The second component is the opportunity cost. This one is financial in the most direct sense, and it is the one that men in this demographic are most catastrophically underprepared for. Staying in a dead marriage after 55 does not protect your financial position. In most cases, it actively deteriorates it in ways that a clean separation earlier would have avoided. Here's the mathematics that nobody shows men until it is too late. In a marriage where the emotional partnership has ended but the financial partnership continues, spending patterns almost universally diverge in ways that benefit one party significantly more than the other. She is spending on the life she is building for herself within the marriage, the friendships, the personal development, the activities that are constructing her post-marriage identity while the marriage still legally exists. You are spending on the maintenance of a shared life that is not actually shared anymore. You are funding two separate lives under the accounting fiction of one household. And when the divorce eventually comes, and in dead marriages it almost always eventually comes, the assets available for division have been reduced by years of this divergent spending pattern, while the legal entitlements remain unchanged. The opportunity cost also includes what you are not doing with the years you are spending inside a dead marriage. The men I work with who separate in their mid-50s and rebuild have a statistically meaningful window for financial recovery, for new relationships, for the construction of a second chapter that has genuine life in it. The men who stay until 65 or 70 because they were waiting for the right moment, or for the children to settle, or for retirement to change things. Those men have a significantly compressed window. Every year inside the dead marriage is a year outside the life that was available to you. That is an opportunity cost. It is real. And unlike the money, the years cannot be recovered at all. The third component is the identity cost. This one is the least discussed and, in my experience, the most devastating for men in this demographic. A long marriage, even a dead one, perhaps especially a dead one, is a powerful identity structure. You know who you are in relation to her. You know your role. You know the rhythms of the days and the shape of the weeks and the specific texture of a life that has been running on the same track for decades. That knowing, even when what is known is painful, provides a form of stability that men over 50 are often more dependent on than they realize. And the identity cost of staying is not the cost of losing that structure. It is the cost of never finding out who you are without it. The men I have worked with who stayed too long in dead marriages consistently describe the same experience when they eventually leave. The disorienting discovery that they had stopped being a person and had become a function, a provider, a presence, a placeholder in an arrangement. They had maintained the external architecture of a self while the interior had quietly hollowed out over years of living in a marriage that no longer required anything real from them. The identity cost of the dead marriage is the slow erosion of the self that happens when you are present in a life that does not actually see you. And that erosion, sustained over years, costs men something that money and time and therapy can eventually address but never fully return. I want to stay here with you for a moment before we move to the fourth component, because I know that some of the men listening to this right now are sitting with a recognition that is uncomfortable in a very specific way. Not the discomfort of new information. The discomfort of information that confirms something you have already known privately for longer than you want to admit. Some of you have been doing the calculation I am describing for years. You have been feeling the longevity cost in your body every morning. You have been watching the opportunity cost accumulate every year. You have been aware, at some level beneath the level of conscious acknowledgement, that the person you used to be has been getting quieter and harder to locate inside the life you are currently living. And the reason you have not acted on that knowledge is not cowardice. I want to say that plainly. The reason men in this demographic stay inside dead marriages long past the point of genuine calculation is not weakness, and it is not passivity. It is something more specific and more human than either of those. It is the particular terror of a man who has built his entire sense of worth around his ability to hold things together, who has been the one who did not quit, who did not walk away, who honored his commitments regardless of what it cost him, confronting the possibility that the most honoring thing he could do right now is leave. That the commitment he made to himself, to his own life, to the man he was before the marriage consumed him, that commitment also deserves to be honored, And that honoring might require the very thing he has spent decades defining himself against. That is not a small thing to sit with. I know that the fourth component of the retirement tax is the one that arrives last and hits hardest. I am calling it the compounded regret cost. And unlike the other three components, which accumulate gradually and can be partially quantified as they build, the compounded regret cost arrives in a concentrated form at a specific moment, usually the moment when the divorce finally happens, or the moment when a health event forces the question, or the moment when a man looks at another man who left earlier and sees clearly what a different decision would have produced. The compounded regret cost is the emotional and psychological weight of having delayed a necessary decision past the point where its full range of outcomes was still available. It is the grief not just of a marriage ending, but of years spent inside the ending that did not have to be spent there. It is the specific and piercing recognition that the window for certain things, certain relationships, certain experiences, certain versions of yourself, has closed in the time you spent waiting for the right moment to act. Men who leave dead marriages at 55 have a different relationship to regret than men who leave at 68. Not because leaving at 68 is wrong or too late. It is never too late to choose a life with more truth in it, but because the compounded regret cost is real, and it is heavier for every year of compounding. And the men who carry it deserve to have had someone tell them clearly what was accumulating while they were waiting. So let me tell you clearly, the retirement tax is not a metaphor. It is being paid right now in your body, in your finances, in your sense of self, and in the years that are moving past you while you wait for a moment that the dead marriage will never provide on its own. The dead marriage does not get better with time. It gets more expensive. The bill does not decrease because you have been patient. It increases because you have been present inside something that stopped returning value while continuing to extract it. What you do with that information is yours to decide. I am not here to tell you to leave. I am not here to tell you to stay. I am here to make sure that whatever you decide it with accurate information about what your current situation is actually costing you. Not what it looks like from the outside, not what it costs you to admit, but what it is actually, documentably, measurably taking from the years you have left. A man who knows the real price of what he is paying can make a real choice. A man making a real choice, whatever that choice is a man who will not spend his final years asking himself why he waited so long to see what was always there to be seen. The most expensive thing a man over 50 can own is a marriage that stopped being a marriage years ago and that he is maintaining at full cost anyway. Drop a comment. Men, when did you first start to feel the weight of staying? And what was the story you told yourself that made it feel like the only option? Subscribe to Relational Insights. Every week, Mr. Wesley breaks down the hidden costs inside marriage failure, divorce, and the decisions that determine what the second half of your life actually looks like.